Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining the AI and machine learning with Microsoft Copilot and Azure OpenAI webinar. Before we start, I'd like to introduce our AI practice lead who will be running this webinar. His name is Shane Castle. I've had the pleasure of working with him on multiple engagements and projects, and I can tell you this guy knows his stuff, and he gets really excited by technology. And to be honest, he gets me excited as well. Whenever there's something new, we always sync up and chat about it. And specifically now, the hot topic of the day, you could say of the year, of the last 2, 3 years, and the way it has been developed and evolved, is AI. And we want to just welcome you to this webinar. Before we start the webinar and before Shane takes over, I just wanted to give you a quick, my name is Chintan Mehta, My name is Chintan Mehta. I'm the account director at Centrilogic, part of the sales and development teams. And we look forward to hosting you for this webinar. Before we start, I just wanted to go through a quick introduction to Centrilogic, who we are, what we do, and before we get into the subject of the hour. So who are we, Centrilogic? Centrilogic, we're a group of very highly certified, very experienced Microsoft and other technology consultants. We have senior consultants with over 15 years experience across technology, people, process, and transformation. This is very important, especially with this subject and matter of today's session. We have delivery teams across North America, Europe, and we target from large enterprises to government organizations to small to medium businesses. We are your trusted advisors, we are your partners, and we love working with all our clients, delivering value, ensuring that your projects are a success, and the business outcomes are achieved. Speaking of AI, we've actually got quite a bit of experience over the last year, 2 years as AI has developed with Copilot, Teams, Power Apps, and OpenAI. I've actually worked with Shane on a couple, and I can tell you it's been very interesting. We've learned a lot across the way, and we come to you presenting this as experts as far as we believe we are. One of the key things is we were nominated as 2023 Partner of the Year in Data Analytics and AI for a work at a port on the eastern seaboard of Canada. And that project went really well. We're up against organizations twice, 3 times our size. But we believed in ourselves, and we made it to the final. And among that, we also have Microsoft Solution Partner designations in the following areas you see on your screen. Specifically for this subject, data and AI, we are a solution partner in that area. We have advanced specializations as well within data, AI, and Azure. And as you can see across the board, from digital and app innovations to infrastructure to security, we've got the necessary designations and partner very closely with Microsoft. With a lot of our clients and engagement, Microsoft quite often brings us into the fold to work with their high-profile clients, and we've got a very good relationship with Microsoft. As you can see, the services we provide, from creating and setting up landing zones to creating cloud-first and serverless architecture to DevOps, CI/CD, automation, governance, very key, and right up until managed services. We provide you with the end-to-end solution for your needs from a technological, business, people, process point of view. Before I continue, I'd just like to introduce Shane again. Shane Castle, he's our Azure lead for Centrilogic. He comes with a wealth of experience. He is our AI guru. And without further ado, Shane, take it away.
Thanks very much, Chintan. Good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen and get started here. So we've got about 30 people in the call. So if you have a question during the talk, please put in the chat. Chintan will be monitoring that, and I'll have time for questions, ample time for questions at the end. And so in today's presentation, just a bit more about Centrilogic. So here's another slide. So we are Toronto-based in Canada, but we have a U.S. presence as well with offices in New York, and we have a UK presence as well. So we're a full service stack company, and so we offer what we call IT as a service, and we have offerings at every layer of the stack, starting from security, infrastructure, data, apps, and digital advisory. And AI is touching every single one of these areas. You know, AI as a focus on its own is certainly something, but it applies to all of these layers. So if you do have a project in mind or would like to discuss further, please reach out to me directly. Be happy to talk to you about all the things that we're seeing and things we're doing with customers. So a bit about today, we're going to talk about AI in general. It's all over the news. You know, it's quite likely you've done some experimentation, but we're going to talk about how we got to where we are right now. Prompt engineering, which is the current way to interface with the machine. And today's focus is going to be around Microsoft Copilot, specifically Microsoft 365 Copilot for Office. So Copilot for Office, and I'll explain how many Copilots there are and how that word Copilot is all over the place. So this is really focused on business users. I will be a little technical explaining how this works, just to give you an idea of what's going on under the hood. You know, how is it that it's doing what it's doing? But then we'll really shift the focus to how to use this in a day-to-day business setting. That's what today's talk is about. And then briefly, I'll be talking about Copilot for sales, and then custom Copilots and extending those Copilots through Copilot Studio. And the business case for this, is it like the number one question we get is, hey, everyone's hearing about AI. Is it worth the bother? You know, are you going to save money, make more money, both? How to kind of measure what's worth spending time on. Then I'll move into, so once we're done with the slides, I'll move into a demo. And then we'll have the question period. Oh, we just got, yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's talk about AI. So I'm going to get a little technical here for a bit, and then we're going to shift gears into the Microsoft Copilot specific. So the word AI is a very overloaded word. There is artificial intelligence, which encompasses all of effectively computers doing things intelligently. Within artificial intelligence, there's kind of two camps. There's the symbolic camp, which is hard logic and using inference rules and that kind of thing. And then there's the connectionists, which is machine learning and statistics. And historically, those two camps have kind of been at odds. For a long time, machine learning was not the prominent solution because of the sheer amount of compute power required. But with the advent of GPUs, and you've probably heard NVIDIA in the news, the ready availability of teraflops, you know, which is 1 trillion operations per second. So, you know, even 10 years ago, that would have been cost prohibitive. But now we have trillions and trillions and trillions of operations per second available at our fingertips. Things have changed. So within machine learning, which is effectively applied statistics, there's the field of deep learning, which is having a machine train itself without any instruction, just saying, go do this and you figure it out on your own. You know, I'm oversimplifying a lot of it, but that's effectively what deep learning is. And then within deep learning, there is what we call generative AI, and that is where ChatGPT comes in, and everything that's been in the news for the past 18 months or so is specifically within generative AI. So when you say AI, we're talking about all of this, and this is still only a subset. There's even more to it. But where did we come from? So in the 1950s, the term AI was coined, and they thought by 1960, they'd have this solved and we'd have thinking machines and everything would be great. And obviously that didn't come to pass. So then we went into what we call the first AI winter, where everyone was all hyped up. It was like probably, I don't know if it was, I wasn't around back then, but, you know, equal levels of hype around thinking machines, and they're going to do all this stuff. Is that, you know, certainly feel the hype around us right now. And when that didn't come to pass, everyone's like, well, you know, that didn't work. So they gave up on it. Then the idea of the expert system. So an expert system is a set of rules, and this is a symbolic-based AI, like I was mentioning earlier, going through a set of rules and rules and rules. And if you got a group of human experts together, and if they could explain the way they think, and you capture that thinking into rules, you would have an expert system. So that was all the rage in the 80s. And again, it didn't quite, it was good. It's good in use cases. There are expert systems still in use today that are very good for their domain, but they don't apply generally. And that's where they kind of fell down. Then in the 2000s, a few things happened. One, we had a decade of exponential increases in compute power. And you can see the theme of compute power basically driving most of this. And the idea of the recursive neural network came to pass. So that's a neural network that works forward and then loops back on itself and updates itself. And so it was a new architecture, very heavy compute, but then was able to get a lot of results. And this is, if you remember, a decade or so ago, the first machines that were able to recognize a picture of a cat from the internet. And that's what these kind of networks were. Then the big breakthrough came in 2017 in a paper published by a research team at Google called "Attention is All You Need." So you can go find this paper online. It's heavily cited, and in this paper, they talk about the idea of a transformer architecture. So the transformer is really, and it's not Optimus Prime, but the transformers is really what changed things for us now. So of that core group within Google's like, well, it's a nice idea, but we're busy with search. So Google kind of let it pass. So a group of them left and joined a company called OpenAI and put together an implementation of the transformer technology and called it ChatGPT, which is generalized pre-trained transformer. And the idea there is now we have human-level parity of text generation. And it worked, and everyone went crazy. And here we are. So in 2023, Microsoft's there, Llama's on board. Anthropic is a set of OpenAI employees that spun off and created their own. They're now working heavily with Amazon, and things are changing by the minute, really, out there. Every day there's new news. So where we stand now, Google has Gemini, Elon Musk's X has Grok, Databricks has released DBRX, which is a data-focused LLM, but the underlying architecture is known. So anyone out there with access to data and access to tons of compute power can put one of these together, and that's where we're seeing all this competition for data center space, AI, and GPUs. And where this is all going, so OpenAI has published a roadmap of AGI. So AGI is kind of the holy grail of where we're going with AI, and that is artificial general intelligence, which is full human parity on all tasks. We're not there yet, but there is a published roadmap for when we get there. Some estimates it could be in the next as early as 3 or 4 years by the end of the decade. And others are saying it's at least 20 plus years, and some are saying it's not possible. It'll never happen. Historically, the people that say it'll never happen have been retracing their steps, but so we'll see. So that's where we're going. So now I'm going to talk about what transformers are and how they relate to kind of the other ideas of AI. So there's regression models, and this is traditional machine learning. And this would be if you want to predict the value of a house. So if you have a bunch of houses in a neighborhood, how much they sold for, how much bedrooms they are. If you have an example house and you say, how much is this house worth? That would be using linear regression or statistics in machine learning to come up with a value for a house. So that's not generative AI. That's AI, but not generative AI. Next one is classification. So these classification algorithms say, if say you have an inbound email, you have to categorize it as, is it spam or not spam? Or if you have, a credit card transaction, you have to categorize this as fraudulent or real. So that's a classification AI problem. Then there's clustering. So you have groups. Let's say you're in sales and you want to combine customers together to give them particular messaging or tailor a product to that group. You say, given all this data, what are the groups of people we can find in this data? And that's a type of machine learning. Then there's rule-based, which I mentioned earlier with the expert systems. So this is one of the places where expert systems and rule-based systems do very well is in medical diagnosis, where there are so many subtleties in what a a medical condition may be, that it's like, is it this or this, and then if this condition. So it's this big chain of if then else's with a bunch of rules. So that's what a rule-based system is. You can also see this in business settings, in transaction processing systems, insurance adjudication, all that kind of thing will be based around rules. Then it comes to reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning is really in the market today. If you've been watching the OpenAI announcements this week, you can see they've announced a new refinement of reinforcement learning, which is reinforcement fine-tuning. That's a subject for another day, but it's very exciting stuff. But the idea here is the carrot and a stick for the AI. So you give it a task, and if it does well, you give it a treat, and if it doesn't do well, you take the treat away. In this case, it's a 1 or a 0. The treat is a 1, and not a treat is a 0. So it will, when you run the model, if it does something that you want it to do, you assign it a 1, and that weighting, it starts leaning towards that way and doing more and more of that, and doing less and less of the 0, which is what they call a cumulative reward. So it maximizes cumulative reward. Then there are diffusion models. So if you've used any of the AI image generation tools, if you've seen those out there, those are basically using grids of pixels and learning from those pixels, which pixels go together. Also a completely separate technology, very exciting, growing very rapidly. And again, earlier this week with OpenAI releasing Sora, now from text you can generate a full video. Also a topic for another day, but if you look up Sora.com, you can see those live videos. It's pretty exciting stuff and very hot off the press. And lastly, to today's talk, to the focus of today is the transformer. So how do transformers, and what are they, and how do they understand language, and how is Copilot able to do what it does? This is what we're going to dive in now. So GPT, generalized pre-trained transformer. So ChatGPT is generative pre-trained transformer, and the idea there is it generates text and it's pre-trained. So the pre-training means they went on the internet and collected all the data on the public internet. Every book ever published publicly, videos, music, news sites. So a lot of this, there's copyright concerns around where they got all this data, but collecting petabytes and petabytes of information from the web. Collecting them into the data set, and you have this massive data set, and run through this architecture on that data and create a model. So right now the GPT model is about 5 gigs in size. It's a file. It's a bunch of math in a single file that's about 5 gigs. That is the database. You can effectively, also oversimplifying, but think of it as the database that runs on the transformer architecture. Just a quick thing about GPT. So GPT went to 100 million users in 3 months. So this is the fastest growing product in human history. Nothing has ever gone from not existing to 100 million users. And they're now over far larger numbers just later. But 3 months, mobile phones were quick at 16 years. GPT just 3 months to get to 100 million people. So I'm talking about neural networks, and I'm going to go into how GPTs work with the pre-training. When they say training, so in this image, you can see on the left, there's an image with a bunch of people in it. So all of that is a series of pixels. So if you cut that image into each one of those little images, each into its pixels, you can see that it would be fed into what they call the first layer of the network. And this is modeled off the human brain. This is not exactly how a human brain works, but it's very similar to a human neuron. So neurons, we have 7 layers of neurons in the human brain, and each neuron has axons and connections basically between the layers. So what we're trying to do in software is emulate a human brain. And to date, we just historically have not had the computational power to do it. But now with the exponential growth and hyperbolic growth in GPU technology, for the first time we're approaching having human level brain level compute in a single chip. So we'll have thousands and thousands of human level brain chips available. So what it does is, as the first layer is exposed to these pixels, the second layer notices the patterns and kind of compresses some of them. And then the third layer notices patterns there. And you can see these kind of patterns emerging, so that as you get deeper into the network, and if you hear about deep learning is how many layers of this are there. And the more layers you add, the better the learning, or that's the theory to date. So you may go to hundreds or thousands of layers deep in this learning, and that's where you get these pattern emergence. And then from that, in the neuron, it is able to recreate the base image. So this is a mapping of inside this synthetic brain of what it was exposed to from data from the real world. And then you get to the output layer. So when you ask for, hey, create me an image of, a basketball player, that in this layer, it's been exposed to what that is, and that's how it's been able to generate, which is very similar to how humans learn, starting from a baby, continuously exposed to sensory input, and over a lifetime, you know what a basketball player looks like. So where are we today in the market? Microsoft 365 Copilot. Microsoft is a partner with OpenAI, so the OpenAI models power Microsoft 365 Copilot. But as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of competitors. So Claude from Anthropic, Gemini from Google, Facebook's Llama, which is open source. Llama is an interesting case that you can actually download Llama and run it on your machine locally without having to pay a fee. So that's a whole subtopic in its own. X producing Grok and DBRX from Databricks. So all these models are all implementing that same neural network technology that I was talking about earlier. So at this point, I suspect I would, if we were in person, I'd say by show of hands, how many people have used ChatGPT? I assume many of you have used ChatGPT and potentially Microsoft Copilot, but just some stats. That it scored the earlier model. This is based on 3, 5, and 4 that it placed in the 94th percentile on the SAT. The newer models like O1 that have been released in the last month have far surpassed this intellectually. So ChatGPT, as it stands, could be admitted to law school and pass the law school finals. In medical, there are many cases now where the generative models are surpassing human diagnoses. So the medical field is undergoing transformation as they try to understand how do human doctors pair and combine and leverage this technology for more accurate diagnoses and better outcomes for patients. So it's a very exciting area, let alone programming, accounting, history, and every other field of human knowledge, mastery across all of these broad range. And in earlier versions of this presentation, I said it doesn't have reasoning and it can't do math, but recent updates, particularly in the O1 model, it has a full reasoning engine and now is able to perform PhD level mathematics, physics, economics, and other tasks at that level. It's quite astounding where it's come in, even just 6 months. So how does it work? So I'm jumping to the key topic in the Transformer paper, and the paper is called Attention is All You Need. So that's the title of the paper. What is attention? If you look at this example, the bank of the river and money in the bank. To an English native speaker, the difference between those is obvious. For the last 4 decades, the difference between those sentences was a challenge for a computer to understand what the difference between those two things were. Every AI system we had come up to date could not solve this very simple distinction. Then something changed, and what changed is this idea of attention. And what they basically said is, what we're going to do is chop the topic into tokens, and what we're going to do is to see how things are related to each other. So we take all the knowledge in the world and break it up and see statistically how things go together. And so we turn those into what they call embeddings. So the embeddings is taking the letters or pixels in the case of images and turn them into vectors, which in math is basically an arrow. You can think of an arrow in multidimensional space. But the attention is they add the position. So this is the attention saying, hey, when you say money in the bank, when money and bank appear close together, that probably means one thing. When you say bank and river close together, that means something different. That's and when you say it out loud, it's like, well, that's pretty obvious, but it took 4 decades to come up with that one. So adding in the attention is doing this on the proximity and also having access to petabytes of data and the compute power to be able to do this at petabyte scale is the other thing that was missing. So maybe 4 decades ago, we could have come up with this. Well, Geoffrey Hinton, if you look at Geoffrey Hinton's early work from the 80s, he did postulate doing this. He's just saying it's just feasible. It's infeasible with machine hardware at the time. Now we take the attention, we resolve that through, and basically say, okay, if you have all these words, what is the most likely next word? And that is through a softmax. So here's an example of how this works. We're going to write a story. Right? Very simple ask, write a story. So the way this does it under the hood is it chops it into 4 tokens, write a story and period. Then what it does is it maps that onto the embedding. And here's kind of a visualization of how embeddings work. So you can see, soccer ball, basketball, tennis ball, all statistically in multidimensional space. Those words occur, related to sports, for example. And then you have buildings kind of in the bottom. And so by mapping all the words and all the text and all the video and all the world, we come up with this massive statistical database of human experience. And that's when you say write a story, it creates that vector. So here it's like, a 4-element vector, but there'll be more elements. And then it maps it into there. And then you add the position. And this is really the magic, is adding that attention to say, write a story. Because if you said story write, that might be someone who writes stories versus saying you want to write a story. So adding the order information on there, and then doing a search, and then just saying statistically, in all of history, if you say write a story, what is the statistical next word that happens? In English, it happens to be once, for once upon a time. So there's a 50% chance that the next word should be once. And then what you do is you take that write a story once, and you feed it back in. And then you say, now I have the vector write a story once. Statistically, what is the next likely word? So here's the once at the output, and that gets fed back in. So you say write a story once, and then it gets fed back in. The response is upon, gets fed back in, time. So if you're working with Copilot and you kind of see the text kind of going, you may see it stutter sometimes, and then it kind of spits stuff out. It's because it's looping like this. So this is not really the way people think. You don't think one word at a time, but this is how the generative AI works. And the reason I'm bringing this up is when you hear, Copilot can make mistakes. It can, because all it is statistically, mathematically guessing, what the next word is. So this is not proven. It's, but once you have enough content, the guesses get pretty good. The statistics get pretty good. And that's how it works. So that leads us into the prompt. So the prompt is the text you provided, the initial vector, you can call it, to say, how do we get things rolling? So that's where the first thing you type in is kind of sets the stage for what's going on. So there are particular things you can do in a prompt that will likely give you the outcome you're looking for. So prompt engineering, is basically a fancy word for saying how to ask smart questions. The smarter the question you ask, the smarter the answer you're going to get back out. And you can ask it to help with your questions. So that's a good, if you say, hey, I need to make a prompt, I'm trying to do this, and you can interact with Copilot to build yourself a better prompt, and then you can hang on to those prompts. If there's a task you perform regularly, you say, here's the prompt, and maybe you change the dates, or you change it to a different customer, that kind of thing. And at this stage, it is an art, not a science. So if you're very skillful in prompt engineering, your output from the tool can be dramatically different from someone who is not as skilled in the prompting. So if you say, well, you're not getting the results you want or the results you've heard about, try looking for prompts. There's a lot of prompts published in the world, or if you know someone who's savvy with Copilot, say, hey, could you share some of your prompts with me, which is very handy. So that's GPT in a nutshell, and now I'm going to talk about Microsoft Copilot specifically. So that's the technology, where we came from, how it works, what's under the hood, and now let's get in the car. So Microsoft has invested heavily in AI. I'm sure you've seen marketing material coming from Microsoft, and they've infused AI and Copilot into all of their products. It does make it a challenge in that there's a lot of confusion as to what Copilot is, because it's not one thing. There are at least 50 instances of Copilot. Many of them are licensed completely different. So it'd be like every app Microsoft had is called Excel. Use Excel to Excel to Excel. So the Copilot name needs to be clarified. Today, I'm talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is Copilot for Word, Office, Excel. I'm not talking about Copilot in Azure. I'm not talking about GitHub Copilot or GitHub for Power BI. There's all of these Copilots, and they're all very exciting. There's just more than content that would fit in today's talk. So here's what's in scope for today. Chatting with Microsoft's 365. So this does reach across all of these products. So you're able to ask about documents, emails, Teams meetings, PowerPoints, all that good stuff all in one place. Then within Teams, if we have the time, I will do a demo of Copilot in Teams. For Copilot in Outlook, you can summarize emails, you can draft emails, quite handy there. Word. The Copilot in Word is probably the most advanced because, as you saw earlier, with the focus on text, and generating text. That is Word's domain. And you'll see that within Word, you can generate a lot of exciting content. Same in PowerPoint. PowerPoint is able to take Word documents, PDFs, other such things, and generate full presentations from that content. Very handy too. If you have a meeting coming up and you have, say, various emails or discussions you want to say, summarize all this into a PowerPoint, can generate you a nice PowerPoint that covers off those topics. Copilot in Excel is improving dramatically. It's kind of limited to tables at this point, so I wouldn't focus on Copilot for Excel. OneNote and Loop. Loop is like a shared version of OneNote, effectively, if you haven't seen Loop before. And for example, in Teams, you can have a loop connected to each team meeting where the AI, as you're having the team, Copilot can be writing minute notes into Loop, for example. Okay, so when I said earlier there are 50 Copilots, here is just a spectrum of the current Copilot offerings within the Microsoft suite. And there's, of course, all the other competing companies as well. So it basically falls into three categories. Modern work is Copilot for Office. So this is what I'm talking about today. So here's the things I demoed today are in the bottom of the screen, the bottom slice of the pie here. Then into business apps, there's Copilot in LinkedIn. There's now Copilot Recruiting or LinkedIn Recruiting Copilot. I forget what the name of it is. But yeah, if you go over to LinkedIn, it can help you look for candidates. If you're a candidate, it can help you look for openings and roles. So Copilot built into LinkedIn is everything around kind of HR, networking, that kind of stuff. But then within Dynamics, you have Copilot for finance. You can do Copilot on your AR, AP, GL, all kinds of reporting, things where they call this talking to your data, having a conversation with your data. You ask Copilot to do calculations, and what it does is generate SQL statements. It generates Python code to do data analysis. And so this whole talking to your data in a business context is where Dynamics really shines. Kind of moving up the stack into the Power Platform. There's a lot of exciting innovation going on in the Power Apps where you can both talk to help create Power Apps using AI and then have AI-powered Power Platform apps. So it can dramatically reduce the time it takes to produce an application all on the Power Platform. Then going in the developer stack, fully integrated into Visual Studio. It can analyze code, debug code, refactor code, document code, generate unit tests, all of this kind of great stuff. Also built into VS Code, but GitHub Copilot is a separately licensed product. So each one of these areas is separately licensed. Within Windows, it's built into Windows as well. And if you have Windows 11, you may have seen the Copilot logo appear on your start bar. That's Copilot for Windows, which is different than Copilot for 365, which is different than Copilot. And then there's Bing Copilot, which is Copilot in the browser. I will demo that, and you'll see the difference. If you have a paid M365 subscription, it changes the context of how you use Bing in the browser. So there's the Microsoft account public Bing Copilot, and then there's the licensed, private, corporate data accessible Bing Copilot. Lastly, in Fabric for reporting and in the entire data platform within Azure itself. Azure AI, again, to the point where you can just chat with your infrastructure and say, hey, deploy me a virtual machine, or what's the state of my virtual machines? Can you reboot a virtual machine for me? Could you deploy a PaaS database? That's evolving very quickly, so it's not as mature in the area, but you can see where it's going. That certainly in the next foreseeable future, you'll just be able to say, hey, build me out some infrastructure, make sure it's all monitored. Thank you very much. And off it goes. Okay, let's talk about prompts briefly. I'll get to the demo fairly soon. A few things is, so Microsoft is very concerned with ethical use of Copilot and professional use of it, because given that it can say anything about anything, there's potential for abuse. So it will filter, like it'll censor itself and not produce offensive content. So knowing what works and what doesn't work is good. And the start a new topic, if you have a big long topic running, there is a context length. It kind of has like a short-term memory. And if you find the answers are not so good after you've been talking to it for quite a while, you've probably hit the end of the context window, and you just start a new chat, and that'll freshen things up. So it's just things to keep in mind. The idea of when you're creating a prompt in Office, there are things you may want to do. So if you want to edit text, or if you want to transform documents, you're saying, okay, let's say you have an FAQ, and you want to turn that into a slide because you're presenting to maybe somebody's coming on board, you're doing some training. So there's kind of the generative stuff where you're saying take content and create new content for me. Or the other kind of half is, I have this content and I want to quickly understand it, I want to summarize it, or I want to update it. So it's really creating new content and understanding existing content. So here's an example of a good prompt. You want to hang on to this one. If you have 4 components of a prompt, you'll get really good results. The first one is have a goal. What is it that you want it to do? So in this case, generate 3 to 5 bullet points. That's our goal. Next, provide context. The more context you provide, and if you remember back in the statistical thing that we're doing this arrow and saying things that are together, you have this very large statistical space that it's kind of chasing through this maze to get you the answer you want. So the context that you provide, and in this case, I'm preparing for a meeting with a client to discuss their brand campaign. So the words that it chooses will be more like client-facing type words, and versus highly detailed, or if it's too detailed or under-detailed. If it's not sufficient detail, say provide lots of detail, or say keep it short and sweet. And in this case, we say 3 to 5 bullet points, right? We don't want a large 10-page document. Although if you did need a 10-page document, you could say generate a 10-page document and go into excruciating detail because there are time and place for that. Lastly, the source. Not lastly, second from last. So we have a goal, we have a context, and we say, give me these bullet points and focus on emails and chats I've been having since June. So here's the time frame and the content. So you may have a bunch of documents in SharePoint, you may have documents in your OneDrive, but here I'm just saying, hey, I've been chatting with the team, I've been emailing the team, just talk about the conversations we've been having, don't focus on the documents. You could also say include all documents in relation to this, including going to our CRM or external systems, that kind of thing can be in there. And then lastly, set the expectation. So you have the goal, context, source, and expectation. So keep it simple because it can be very formal. You can say, write it at a PhD level of formality, and it'll give this incredibly dense, hard to understand language, but that'll be exactly very precise. But so yeah, knowing what your target audience, that's managing your expectation. Other things you can do, content ideas. Say I have an upcoming presentation, I need some ideas. Can you give me five ideas for the name for the presentation? 5 things I should talk about to an audience that does XYZ. Translation to and from any language on Earth. Pretty much every language that there is documented on the planet is now covered, and even a lot of these kind of dead languages or languages with very small communities are being included. So it's quite fascinating there. Generates excellent stories. And if you have technical issues, you're like, oh, I'm using Word. How do I do this? It'll give you an answer there. Okay, so here's an example of a detail between two prompts. So prompt 1, write a blog post about sustainable practice in architecture. This does not have the 4 components versus prompt 2, craft a 1,500 word blog. I won't read the whole thing out, focusing on the significance. So you can see the second prompt, the output from the second prompt will be a near complete document versus the first prompt, the output. If you're in Copilot for Word and you put in the first one and you say write the blog post, it'll write something, but it may not be what's in your mind. So really communicating clearly and learning to talk to the machine is a skill, and a skill that needs practice. But being able to produce prompts like this, you'll get fascinating results, and it takes far less time to write this paragraph than it would be to write a 1,500 word blog post. Okay, and then here's one for instructions where you're saying, keep in mind all these things, and then adding context, example, instruction. The differentiator here is that at the end, if you say what to do at the end, and you think about that arrow that you're pointing through statistical space, at the end, if you put the instruction at the end, you'll get better results in some cases. So experiment with both. And as the models change and as the models are tuned, even saying the same thing just a different way can have dramatic difference in output. And again, it's an art, not a science. Other things you can do with Office Copilot. Talk about topics. So in Teams, recapping a meeting, which I will show, I will demo that. Summarizing an email, drafting new emails, revising content, talking about topics, and summarizing what people talked about. There's all kinds of these. There's references. If you go to the Microsoft Copilot site, it's got lots of examples of things to use. If you're saying, oh, what can I use Copilot for? It'll tell you all about it. Security. So security is always a concern for everyone, particularly introducing Copilot into a complex corporate environment. You want security to be top of mind, and arguably you should start with security, and then keep layering it on. So Microsoft is very cognizant of the security requirements, and you're able to put fine-grained controls on which content it has access to, how it indexes data. So if someone does not have access to SharePoint data and they say, what's going on with payroll information, it'll respond back, I don't know, or I don't have access to that. And then, but somebody that has security permissions it would say, here's the details. So it's important if you're implementing this in your environment and you're on the IT side of the house, having the security structure of your SharePoint tightened up is very important prior to implementing Copilot. So a lot of environments have big, wide open SharePoint, and there's documents lying around all over the place. So moving to Copilot is an opportunity to do a security review, and this is something Centrilogic would be happy to help you with. We've done this with multiple other clients to go through and say, okay, how do we get Copilot ready with our data? And one way to do it is you can create kind of a smaller shared instance and just kind of add content on a contained or gated process, so that you're not just opening up all of SharePoint to Copilot. That's one approach. I won't go into the details of this slide, but the important thing here is that the model is hosted within the Microsoft environment. The Microsoft Graph, that's all your Teams, emails, OneNote, Word documents, OneDrive, all that stuff is how it can be indexed. And then when you interact with Copilot, you're interacting through the applications, but you're connecting to the Microsoft Graph, and that's what's generating queries into the language model. If you'd like more detail on this architecture, I can go a lot more detailed there outside the scope of this. But so here, as a user, all the way on the left, you're interacting with the Office applications with Copilot in the context of those Office applications. It sends the query off to 365, and that creates a query. So there's an instance of the OpenAI models running in a secured Azure environment. So the important thing there is they have the Microsoft AI customer promise. So your data does not leave that contained environment, and your data is not incorporated into models. So it's, not all of the competing model providers have that promise, but Microsoft in writing has said, we will not appropriate your data. Your data is your data. Which is important, particularly in a corporate setting. So creating these indexes, the semantic index is how, so we take all that text, documents, emails, all that stuff, generate those embedding models, and that's the proprietary index for your business. So the more data your business has, and the more you index your data, the better tailored your custom Copilot, unique and secured to your business, can be a pretty significant competitive advantage if you need access to processes, forms, customer information, where to go for sales, all these there's tons of opportunities to really, really, really boost productivity. And we're just this journey is really just starting. The next 2, 3, 5 years are going to be quite amazing. Couple questions. Is Microsoft use customer data? No, they do not use your customer data. So in the Microsoft environment, if you use OpenAI, ChatGPT, the free one, part of the terms and services is you do agree to anything you type in there, any document you upload does get included into the model. So be sure if you're using public chat, if you haven't paid for LLM access, assume they're absorbing your data, because that's kind of the trade. They're saying, we'll give you access to our stuff for free, but in exchange, you will, we get your data. So just be aware of that. And in the case of Microsoft and the Azure platform, they absolutely do not absorb your data. Okay, so now I'm going to move to Copilot for Sales. Sales is layered on top of Microsoft 365 Copilot and can be directly integrated into your CRM. So not just Dynamics 365, but also Salesforce and other CRMs. You can create deal rooms in Teams, and there's all kinds of things from a sales focus from business that you can do. So prior to a meeting, use custom copilots to get customer information, to tailor your offers, to understand who the customer is. Use PowerPoint to generate the initial presentation. During Teams, have a call, view the transcription. You can talk about the meeting within Teams, how it's going. I'll show a demo of that. And even if you don't use these features, it's important to know they exist, that they may be being used in a meeting you're part of. Automatically sending follow-up emails and asking Copilot to say, what should we do next? So here's making a pitch. And again, it's kind of the same loop, using Word, PowerPoint, Copilot all together in these flows. And there's a lot of these flows that are available if you want a whole bunch of these, if you're not so much concerned with sales, but other topics on the Microsoft Copilot site. So I talked about these. So here's an example of Copilot for Sales. If you receive an email from a customer, so in the bottom part of the screen, this is an email coming in, you hit the Copilot button and it'll say, automatically add this contact information to Salesforce. So this, for salespeople, is a real time saver. They don't have to open up a web app, start typing all this stuff in. Really time-consuming task that really has nothing to do with sales. It's just housekeeping of records. So really just automating that away so salespeople can focus on selling is very good. And then here is a quick little video, just a couple second demo on you can say, okay, what's new for me in Salesforce? And it'll give you a list of opportunities. And you can you summarize what this opportunity is? So instead of having to do research on the customer, it gives you all the details about the customer, the length of the relationship with this. So it's going from Salesforce and from financial systems, tying all that data together and saying, here's the opportunity, here's what's going on, and kind of just a big time saver, productivity booster. Okay, and then within Dynamics, if you're a Dynamics 365 user, you can use AI to generate information about the customer. So it'll enrich data within Dynamics 365 with insights that it's doing from a machine learning model. So this is not necessarily generative, but it's the looping the Copilot together. Okay, and then here we've got an idea of, so you're doing the sale, talking to the customer, drafting an email with Copilot, and there you go, it drafts the email. that so here we're drafting an email for sales, and that it very quickly, from the context of the CRM, from the information it gathered, was able to put this in without. So as a salesperson, you can answer maybe double or triple the number of sales calls that you could normally. And then here, when you have a meeting, so if you do a meeting request, say, okay, I want a follow-up meeting. Instead of having to say, when's your opportunity, when's your availability, it automatically generates the follow-up email about when to find a meeting. And this is a huge time saver, which I'm sure you've personally experienced. Getting time on people's calendars, especially multiple groups of people, is a very time-consuming task. So this really speeds that up and can be a huge benefit. So within Teams, now we're in the sales call. As you're discussing and you have Copilot for Sales, when you're in the Teams meeting, such as the Teams meeting we're in now, you start getting, if someone mentions a competitor, so you're saying, I'm representing company X, and they say, well, we're looking at customer Y's products. In the background, it'll automatically go do a search of customer Y and bring up the strengths and weaknesses of that competitive while you're speaking. So this is kind of next generation stuff, and this is available now today. It's quite wild to see. And as people are talking, if they mention brands or they mention keywords, those start getting indexed as well. And so after the meeting, you can say, what did we talk about? I think with customers, probably we need to figure out the ethics around doing this. So just be aware that this technology exists, and that not everyone's used to this happening. So as we speak, what we say, how we say it, how quickly we say it, all these kind of things are being taken into account and auto-indexed. And then that goes into the follow-ups on afterwards. So that basically the summary of the sales call goes right into Dynamics and auto updates on the customer. Then there's automatic follow-throughs. So if someone mentioned things, or you say get back to them on something, that you can automatically generate the thank you emails and follow-up flows, schedule in phone calls, all this stuff all automatically. And then as a salesperson, you can say, how am I doing? I'll skip over the pricing here. So just running a little over. So I'm going to, the Copilot Studio, I will do a quick talk. Copilot Studio allows you to generate a custom Copilot that in addition to the content here. But we're developing another seminar. So if you enjoyed today's content, please come back in the new year to see the fully focused on Copilot Studio demo. I'm going to stop here in the presentation and jump to the demo just so that we can make sure we get the demo in on time. And let me just share my screen here. And just before, so we do have a question about accessing Copilot from Python. So the answer to that question is Copilot for M365 would not be the right solution. You want to look at OpenAI hosted in the Azure environment, which has a full Python API and a full SDK. So just search for OpenAI, Azure OpenAI Python SDK, and you'll get access to that right away. So here's my demo environment. I'm running Windows 11, and you may see this Copilot. If you have Windows 11, you may see this Copilot button that has showed up. And I'll show you quickly. This is part of the confusion as to what Copilot is. This Copilot is Copilot for Windows, which is not Copilot for 365. When I click sign in, I'm going to click sign in. And now so this is Demo Company Inc. This is a demo tenant that I have. It is an Azure work account. So you can say, go to the work account or use the personal account. So in a work setting, I do not want to do this. So if I click on the work one, which is what I want to do at work, it actually jumps me to Microsoft 365. So this Copilot button right now, as it stands, doesn't do anything for our work environment. And corporate IT should probably turn this button off because it doesn't do anything in the context of 365. So it did open Office for me, Microsoft 365 Office. Whoop. and this is where you want to be. So if you're in the office environment, so here I have a bunch of sample documents, just kind of sample stuff that I'm working with. And you'll notice here, so I have this NIST document, which is a security document about AI. And I have these 3 dots, and I don't see anything Copilot here, right? So this is also just something to know that as things are changing, if I click on OneDrive, now I can access my files. I got some messages here. So now I have the same document, but I have this Copilot button. And this is because I have an M365 Copilot license. Okay, so I click on this. Now I can say summarize the document, create an FAQ about the document, or ask a question. So I'll just summarize the document. And this, I should open the source document. It's about a 20-page PDF from NIST. Let's see if I can open that in another tab. Yeah, I'll just open this. Okay, so it's a 48-page document. So here's the artificial intelligence risk management. If you're in a corporate environment and you're worried about AI risk, I suggest reading this document in general. It's good. This is from the National Institute in the US, publishing guidance on how to use AI in a corporate environment. So I needed a complex document for demo purposes. So now in my other tab, I have my summary. So we're just generating that summary. And it does, you can see there, it does take a little bit of time to go through that summary. But it took that 48-page document, and in just a moment should have it summarized. I am going to go a little bit over on time. So if you have a couple more minutes, I will continue the demo. And if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat now. I'll get to the questions as soon as I can. Okay, that's taking, so there is some time there. So while this is still going, I'll show Copilot in Word. So if I start a new Word document, there's a few things that change. One, I get this Copilot button right here, and I can say draft with Copilot. I can say, write a corporate blog post about Microsoft Copilot. Now, I'm not following my prompting guidelines where I should have the goal and the thing. I'm just showing you the demo of how this works. So here you can see that it creates this document. So here's how to boost productivity. And then you have the ability to update it. So I'll keep that. I think it looks good. So here's this document. Or I could do something like, I'll do a new one here. Write a corporate policy on personal cell phone usage. Emphasize the need to keep corporate information secure. Okay, and you can add more. And if you have existing policy documents that you want to base it on, then you can also say, using these documents as reference, generate a new policy document that maintains that. And if you also have corporate logos and that kind of thing, it can use those. But here, you see you get pretty good permitted usage. Personal cell phones may be used. So you can customize all of this, obviously. But a lot of this content generation that takes a lot of time to produce can be done very quickly. So now I'm going to save this to my OneDrive, and I'm going to call it cell phone use policy. Okay. And now, if I go in here to save a copy, if I go to share, I'm going to copy a link. Okay, so I'm copying a link to this document that I put in my OneDrive. So this is our new corporate, our new exciting corporate cell phone usage policy. And I'm going to go into PowerPoint. So now in PowerPoint, I'm going to create a new presentation. And I'm going to say, create a PowerPoint, create from a file. And I'm going to paste in the link that I just did. And now it's going to read my new cell phone policy document and generate so here it's outlining purpose and scope. generating. Adding some speaker notes. And here we go. Here's my new exciting slide deck on cell phone usage. Obviously that logo's a little bit, I was going to say, change the image to a person on a phone call. So, I don't really like the image it picked. So let's see if we can get it to, oops. Okay, that didn't work. Oh, well, okay, so there. Oh, and that worked. Okay, so you can see here where sometimes it jumps around either way. Now I can say change this slide, make it only 2 bullets. Oh, and I misspelled bullet. Okay, so there, I'm a little bit with the prompts here, so don't worry about that. But here you can see the deck. So data encryption, and so for this logo, if you put it into your SharePoint environment, you can make it use your corporate logos, your corporate colors, and your corporate fonts, so you don't just get these random images that it's putting in. But that is generally Copilot there. And if I open a document, so if I open a deck, so if someone sends you a presentation, you can take Copilot and say, summarize this presentation in 3 bullets. So I don't have time to read all of these slides. I just want to know, what is this deck about? So it's about introducing sustainable architecture, highlights the importance of increasing architecture role and benefits farmers. And it concludes saying, adopting energy renewable is a win-win for farmers and the planet. There you go. So if you have a very big complex document going on, you say, give me the gist. And if there's sales information, it can pluck out that kind of stuff. And then for my last demo, I am going to do a live. So here's the Teams meeting we're in right now. So you may see your name in the list. So if you're using Teams, and I have to use my my Copilot to do this. So now I'm going to click here and I'm going to say, summarize this meeting. And what it's doing, it's going to generate a response of everything that we talked about today. So start it off. Let's let it finish here. Okay, so Chintan, who you remember at the beginning of the talk, introduced Centrilogic, talked about our global presence. And then I introduced the overview of AI, development of machine learning, talked about Copilot applications, talked about prompt engineering, Copilot for sales, data security, and then I did a demo. So there you go. There's a summary of what happened in this call. Was there any action items? I don't recall saying there's an action item, but let's see if it picked up on any. So you can ask anything about these meetings, and if there's a meeting happening somewhere that you didn't attend or you were invited to but weren't able to attend and they transcribed it, you can say, summarize that call at 9 a.m. Okay, and then, sharing the diagrams. Oh yeah, that was from earlier. And then getting out the transcript. So that's Copilot for Teams. And I'll end that demo there. There's a lot more. If any of this was super exciting to you, please reach out and talk. If anyone has any questions, there's any questions I missed. Other than that, have a great day. Thank you for coming.